that residents can help out ahead of tonight's weather event by checking to see if stormwater drains along your streets are clear of leaves and debris. Secondly, make sure you have a plan in the event of a tornado in your area. Communicate that plan to all members of your family or your neighbors as necessary. And by the way, if you want your front lawn to remain safe, if you happen to have any holiday decorations that you don't want to lose, you may want to bring them inside for the duration of the evening. So now with more, here is Warning Coordination Meteorologist Sam Lashley from the Indianapolis branch of the National Weather Service. Sam.
Thank you, Mayor Hogsett. This is a very rare, unique, and dangerous setup for December. We typically do not see conditions like this. The overnight nature makes it especially serious and vulnerable because people will be asleep and not have access to warnings. All of central Indiana has been placed in the enhanced risk for severe thunderstorms. And what that means is that is the level 3 out of a possible 5, where 5 is the most significant. As you can see across southern Illinois and the far tip of southwest Indiana, there is a level 4 for considerable tornadoes and large, long-lived tornadoes down there. We are still expecting the potential for very damaging winds in excess of 70 to 80 miles per hour, as well as the potential for tornadoes. Some of those we cannot rule out could be strong and long-lived as well across this area. So we expect thunderstorms to develop this evening. They may not initially be severe, so we don't want people to let their guard down, but that severe risk is there through the evening. We expect storms between 8 and 9 p.m. to start up across the area. We think they will become most intense between about 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., but especially between midnight and 4 a.m. The highest risk for the most intense storms and tornadoes looks to be from I-70 south, but we don't want people north of I-70 to let their guards down. So that's what we're looking at in terms of storm strength. The storm motions will also be quite fast, between 50 and 60 miles per hour. Again, that makes this a dangerous situation. We will do our best to get warnings out ahead of any storms that are severe, but with that fast motion, storms will be upon people very quickly. So in the middle of the night, there's not a lot of time to get the warning, get up, and get to safety. Our threats for tornadoes, as you can see here, is sort of in the medium range, but damaging winds are of the greatest concern. That's the most likely outcome. But anytime you get an environment like this in the wintertime, those tornadoes can quickly spin up and become strong very quickly as well. Flooding is a possibility, but with that fast storm motion, it looks like these storms will move progressively through, so that should be a primarily localized effect. Again, as we've emphasized already, the overnight timing, people are going to be asleep. They're not used to getting warnings in the middle of the night. So we want to make sure people have multiple methods for getting weather information and warnings. We recommend a NOAA All Hazards Weather Radio that is in proper working order, that is set to alert, and has fresh batteries in it because power outages could be quite common around the area. If you don't have a weather radio, it's best to have your local television and radio stations on. Your cell phones, make sure they're charged before you go to bed. Make sure they are not on Do Not Disturb. Make sure they are set to get the wireless emergency alert messages and have the volume turned up. Now, again, just to re-emphasize here, be ready to act quickly with the overnight hours. Have a plan. Now is the time to make a plan for you and your family for what you're going to do overnight. You want to, when a warning is issued, get up, get to a basement if possible, interior room, a closet, away from windows. Put as many walls between you and the outside as possible, even if you don't have a basement. So that is most important. Cover your heads. If you can grab blankets to protect yourself, that's even better. I just want to emphasize, in the Weather Service, we look at past events to try and compare this to. There's not a whole lot to compare a December event like this to, with the potential for severe storms. The most significant one that we find keeps coming up is the November 6, 2005 event, in which there was a EF3 tornado that went through the Evansville area, and we saw damaging winds across central Indiana from that as well. So if you remember that, significant event. So please take this seriously. We hope for the best, but we have to plan for the worst, and there is that potential for these significant severe storms and tornadoes tonight. With that, I will turn it over to Tom Sellis, Acting Chief of the Metropolitan Emergency Services, and I'll leave you with this summary slide. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The emphasis for today and into tomorrow morning is going to be weather preparedness, right? Have an understanding that we have to be aware of the weather that might happen and to have some kind of a plan in place in case it does and it has some effect on you and your family with that. Emergency operations personnel will be monitoring through the overnight and ready to coordinate with any city agencies or utilities as needed with that. One other emphasis that I like to put out is that if our tornado sirens do go off, they're made for people who are outdoors. With homes being buttoned up for winter weather coming along and windows closed, you might not be able to hear your tornado sirens. So having these weather radios or having your cell phones with the weather app in it is essential for you to be able to get these alerts and be able to hear them. Probably the only other thing we want to make sure that everybody's aware of is that we don't know when or any of this is going to happen, and it can happen quickly, and that's the main thing. It can happen quickly, and timelines and everything else like that, we don't know how quickly warnings can get out. So we want you to be prepared and have an understanding that once something does happen, that you do have recourse by calling 911 if it's an emergency, but also have an understanding if you do call 911, we do get an influx of calls when we have severe weather like that. Stay on the line, do not hang up, and also if you have to, you can also text 911 if needed. If there are no questions, I will turn it over to Director Dan Parker, Department of Public Works. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Salas. I'm joined here today with our Administrator of Stormwater Operations, Lacey Johnson, who will be the lead manager for DPW response for this weather event. We will have on out of our stormwater group, our forestry crews, our channel maintenance, and our rapid response to deal with any high water. Any tree debris should be reported to the Mayor's Action Center at 327-4622. Since this event will happen after hours, please have residents hit option 2 to report that directly to DPW dispatch. Trees down should not be called to 911. They should be called directly to the Mayor's Action Center. Emergency calls go to 911. We expect, obviously, we will have DPW dispatch on through the event and through tomorrow because most folks will notice tree debris and other things down tomorrow morning. So we will have folks on through this event. We will also have our traffic operations crews on standby tonight for any traffic lights that are out. I'd like to remind residents that if they see a traffic light out and it has no power in it, that becomes a 4-way stop. Please do not just drive through an intersection that has a traffic light that has no power. That is, by law, a 4-way stop. So those need to be reported as a 911 call because that is a public safety risk. IMPD and DPW cannot be at every traffic intersection in the city, so please, if you see that, call it in immediately. Finally, with tree downs, if there is a power line down in a tree, please call AES first, then call the city. DPW cannot respond to a tree with power lines in it until AES acts on that tree first. So all tree downs with power lines in it must go to AES first. And then finally, the mayor mentioned storm inlets. Please, every resident, if you have a storm inlet outside your house, please clear that of any leaves or debris so that you do not end up with high water. We will have, like I said, our rapid response out for high water areas in typical areas that flood, but you can do your part by clearing your storm inlets so that you don't have water issues in your neighborhood. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Bodie for questions.
We'll take any questions on this weather event and the city's response.
For Mayor, these winds are almost like tropical storm force. If they're predicted to be 65 miles per hour, which can carry furniture, trash cans, things like that, should folks even take it more seriously and bring everything inside? I mean, if it is at that point, it could be pretty serious.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And my recommendation would be you cannot prepare, too much. And so if you have porch furniture or other things that would be subject to the quick-moving, fast winds, I would, to use a well-worn phrase, batten down every hatch that could be battened down, at least until such time as the morning comes and we can assess whatever damage has occurred overnight.
It's a Friday night. People go out to use their games. I mean, would you advise people to stay in tonight?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think Sam mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but I mean, the period that the National Weather Service is looking at most closely is really any time between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. So there's a 12-hour window there. Now, as Sam indicated, we fear that the most dangerous period of time is from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. People will have to make their own judgments about their evening activities. I know I'm going home and will be monitoring the weather for my family. I certainly would encourage people certainly not to be out any later than absolutely necessary, and to be particularly cautious once that 8 p.m. time frame comes in, and if you're still out at 10 p.m., I just think it is extraordinarily dangerous. It's more dangerous for you to be outdoors than it is in.
Just to follow up on something, I know that we've seen these sudden, fast-moving events come through and just inundate a city with a lot of water. And as much as you tell people to clear their drains, this is a massive city. Is there a concern about the potential for clogged drains or flash flooding? We've seen that happen before in other places.
Dan?
We have seen micro-burst rain events, but given the forecast that Sam talked about in terms of the speed of the storm, our low-lying areas that typically have flooding issues will have barricade drivers out, to block any street. Folks do not, obviously, common sense, please do not drive through high water. But from what we see, if your neighborhood typically doesn't flood, you probably don't have anything to worry about as long as your drains are cleared. But those low-lying areas where we do have high water on streets, please do not drive through that. And what the mayor said, just being careful out there after the clock hour where we could have things down. We're going to have people working in the street. If there's trees down in the right-of-way, we're going to have crews out there. And folks really need to be careful if you have to be out. Because the last thing we want is to make a serious situation even worse.
This time of year, DPW is normally preparing for things like salt on the roads and snow removal. What is that differentiation looking like for you guys this time of month, switching gears from snow plows to these mitigations?
Sure. We had 40 folks on standby Tuesday night for snow, but it's a little bit different in that we have our forestry crews and channel crews ready to deal with debris, deal with trees down. Remind residents if a tree falls down and it's on your property and it lands in the right-of-way, that's your responsibility. Our responsibility are those trees that are in the right-of-way, that are blocking the right-of-way, and we'll have people out. But it is a different situation, as Sam indicated. It's not usual that we're dealing with this in December, but we're ready, and we'll have the appropriate people ready to go, depending on what happens.
Max, you got one more to
Yeah,
put
Mayor,
there?
forgive me if I missed this, but I know there's going to be extra DPW crews on standby. What about for IMPD, IFD? Are you guys going to, are there going to be extra officers, extra firefighters on standby to respond to any emergency situations?
Chief Sells.
At this time, there's not going to be additional personnel on there, but they have all been notified and are aware of the situation with that. So if something needs to change, it can change.